I was the first one to arrive every morning and the last one to leave. That office had become my second home, though the fluorescent lights and humming air conditioning never offered the comfort I craved. I worked hard, harder than anyone else, in that place. And for what? Respect, maybe. Recognition. A raise someday. But mostly I wanted to build something stable, something real. Her name was Lila. She had the kind of laugh that echoed in your chest, like the first spring day after a long winter. We met at a friend's party on a rooftop 3 years ago. She spilled beer on her shirt, laughed about it, and asked me to dance, even though there was no music. She wore scuffed boots and carried herself like she was always halfway through. A daydream. I loved her in that way where it hurts a little because you're always afraid something so bright will eventually burn out. My boss, Eric, was the kind of guy you instinctively disliked but couldn't quite justify hating. At least, not at first. He had perfect hair, a $500,000 smile, and a Rolodex of people who mattered. He shook hands like he meant it, called everyone champ or buddy, and had this way of making his compliments feel like favors you owed him for. I worked under him for 2 years. I took on extra projects, stayed late, even helped him prepare his big quarterly speeches. He said I had potential. He said he saw something in me. Turns out what he saw was my girlfriend. It started with the little things. Lila began canceling plans more often. Work ran late, she'd say, kissing me on the forehead, already scrolling through her phone. She got new clothes I hadn't seen her buy. She started wearing perfume she said was a gift from a friend. She never used to lie, not well anyway, but lately she was getting better at it. Too good. And there's something about someone getting better at lying that makes you feel like you're falling through the floor, except you're still standing. I found out in the worst possible way. It was the company's annual retreat in upstate New York. A fake rustic lodge with hot tubs, catered meals, and enough cheap wine to flood a small country. I wasn't even supposed to be there, but Eric asked me to come last minute. Need someone reliable, you know? Lila came too. She was working freelance marketing for the company. That was her excuse. Her way in. I was walking to my cabin past midnight when I saw them, through the half-open blinds of Eric's suite. Her hands in his hair, his shirt half off, her mouth on his neck. I froze, my breath fogging in the cold air like it could cloud the truth. I didn't knock. I didn't scream. I just stood there, watching the girl I loved unmake everything I believed in. One soft kiss at a time. The next morning, they pretended nothing happened. Eric clapped me on the back like I was his little brother. Lila smiled like she hadn't shattered me into 1,000 sharp, invisible pieces. And I played along. I nodded, I laughed. I ate my eggs like they weren't ash in my mouth. But somewhere, inside me, something changed. Something quiet. Something final. I spent the next 2 weeks moving through life like a ghost. My apartment felt colder. Lila was still there, acting like everything was fine. She touched me less. She avoided my eyes. We had sex once. I stared at the ceiling the whole time, wondering if she was picturing him. After I went into the bathroom and threw up, I looked at myself in the mirror and said nothing. What could I say? I didn't confront her. Not yet. I needed proof. I needed a plan. I needed something more than just pain and suspicion. Because pain is a storm. But revenge, that's a blueprint. I started collecting pieces. I checked her phone when she was in the shower, something I swore I'd never do. There were messages, of course. Not just texts, but photos. Memes he sent her. Inside jokes they clearly shared. A video of them laughing. In a hotel room, champagne bottle in the background, her hand reaching across the screen to stroke his cheek. It wasn't just sex. They were happy. She looked happier with him than I'd seen her in months with me. I forwarded it all to myself. I didn't cry. I just watched the videos again and again until I couldn't hear the sound of their voices anymore. Then I started thinking about the newsletter. Every Friday, it went out to the whole company, all 350 of us. A chirpy little email from the comms team, full of staff birthdays, upcoming events, employee spotlight blurbs. I'd helped with it once when our communications girl had COVID. I still had the access credentials buried in an old email thread. I found them. I logged in. The power in that moment tasted like copper in my mouth. It didn't feel good. It felt necessary. But I didn't rush it. I spent days drafting what I wanted to say. Every sentence I wrote felt like a match I might strike too early. I wanted it to be perfect, not hysterical, not crude. Just the truth. Undeniable. Damning. I started with a cheerful tone mimicking the usual voice of the newsletter. Happy Friday, team! Then a few light updates, reminders about the Monday town hall, a link to the sign-up for the office potluck. Then came the twist. In this week's employee spotlight, I wrote, we'd like to shine a light on a very special partnership. And I told the story. Not with names, not directly, but anyone who knew would know. Sometimes the people we trust most, our leaders, our partners, turn out to be sharing more than just workplace goals. I wrote, sometimes loyalty is just a costume we wear until it gets too heavy. I mentioned the retreat, the room with the blinds open, the late-night meetings that had nothing to do with work. I didn't call it an affair. I called it what it was, betrayal. And I didn't sign it, but I ended it with a line that made my hands tremble even as I typed it. Accountability starts at the top. Transparency starts today. I scheduled it for 8:45 a.m., just as most people would be logging in, coffee in hand. I went to the office early as usual and sat at my desk like it was any other Friday. Except, it wasn't. I watched it happen in real time. The gasps, the silence, the way people stopped typing. Emails slowed. Eric's door stayed closed. Lila didn't show up at all. She knew. By 9:05, my phone started buzzing. Texts from colleagues, some confused, some shocked, some who just sent a simple, "Thank you." Eric's assistant stormed out of his office and left the building. People whispered in corners. The open floor plan suddenly felt like a theater stage, and I was the playwright watching the chaos unfold exactly as I had imagined it. He called me in at 9:30. I walked in slowly. He didn't look powerful anymore. He looked scared, sweating, through his collar, hair messy, like he'd been yanking at it. "Did you do this?" he asked, voice low. I didn't answer. He stood up, trying to reclaim his height. "You've ruined your career," he said. I laughed. It was the first real laugh I'd had in weeks. "Then I guess we're even," I said, and I left his office without closing the door. I expected to be fired. I expected HR to send me a cold email or security to walk me out. But the minutes dragged on, and no one came. By noon, word had spread to the upper floors. I saw the CFO pass by my desk, glance at me with narrowed eyes, and keep walking like I was something toxic leaking from a pipe. But others, people I barely knew, started messaging me quietly. Small words of solidarity, a nod by the water cooler, a quiet, "good on you," as they passed in the hallway. I hadn't realized how many people hated Eric. The company liked to pretend it was a family, but families don't promote predators. He had a history of flirting too much at happy hours, of getting a little too close during one-on-ones. A few whispers had floated through the office over the years, always dismissed with nervous laughs. But now, with the newsletter out, the whispers turned into voices, and those voices became an echo. Lila texted me that afternoon. Not to apologize, not to explain. Just a single message. "Why would you do this to me?" I stared at the screen for a long time. The question felt like A knife spun backward in my gut, as if I had broken something, as if her cheating, her lies, her secret nights in hotel rooms with a man she knew was my boss, my future, meant nothing. As if all that mattered now was that I'd made it public. I didn't answer her. What could I say that wasn't already printed in bold text across 350 inboxes? What apology could I make for refusing to stay quiet? Instead, I sat in my chair, opened my browser, and began collecting job postings. I knew my time here was over. Even if they didn't fire me outright, the weight of what I'd done would hang over every meeting, every email, every Monday stand-up, and I didn't want to rot in the house I'd just set on fire. The next Monday I was called into HR, not by email, but in person. The walk down that hallway felt longer than ever. A silence settled over the office as I passed. People weren't sure if I was a villain or a hero. Neither was I. Inside, I was met by a woman I'd never seen before, someone from corporate. She asked me to sit. She folded her hands and looked at me like I was a patient who'd just confessed to a murder. "We take these matters seriously," she said. Then she asked if I had proof. I nodded and slid my phone across the table. Photos, texts, time-stamped screenshots. I'd backed them up a dozen times just in case. She clicked through them slowly. Her face didn't change. No shock, no pity. Just that same HR neutrality, that steady current of protocol. "Thank you," she finally said. "This corroborates several other complaints." I blinked. "Other complaints?" I asked how many. She didn't answer. She just said, "Enough. They didn't fire me. They gave me 2 weeks paid leave, told me it was for my well-being. The kind of move companies make when they don't know whether to thank you or erase you." I took it. I walked out of the building that day with my shoulders lighter than they'd felt in months. Not proud, not victorious, just done. Lila was gone when I got back to the apartment. Her things were missing. No note, no trace. She'd left the key on the counter. It was strange how something so simple, a metal object, could feel like a funeral bell. I slept for 12 hours straight that night. When I woke up, I made coffee in silence and sat on the floor by the window. The city moved outside, indifferent and wide. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just breathed. 2 weeks passed. In that quiet, suspended time, I remembered how to be a person again. I started running in the mornings, even when it rained. I rearranged the furniture just to feel control over something. I deleted old photos one by one, each tap a small funeral. I read books without checking my phone. I let the stillness become a kind of healing. Then the email came. Eric had resigned, effective immediately. No farewell note, no cake in the break room, just a bland corporate statement thanking him for his years of service and wishing him well in future endeavors. I almost laughed. Even when the truth burns down a building, they still try to sweep the ashes under a rug. Whispers started again, but this time they weren't about me. They were about how long people had known, who else he'd crossed lines with, how many meetings were really excuses. I watched the company fumble with the aftermath, sending out awkward surveys about workplace culture and inclusivity initiatives. Too little, too late. But still, something had shifted. People looked each other in the eyes a little, more. Some smiled at me now, not the pity kind, but the kind that said, "You lit the match we were too afraid to hold." Lila tried to contact me one last time. An email this time. Long, winding. She said she was sorry, that she never meant to fall for him, that it just happened, that she missed who we used to be. I read it twice, and then deleted it without replying. What she missed was the version of me that trusted her. That man was gone. I left the job, a month later. Not because I had to, but because I wanted a new sky above me. I didn't want to walk those halls knowing what happened in the cracks between cubicles. I wanted to build something again, but this time, for myself. I found a new role at a smaller firm where people shook hands without masks behind their eyes, where my boss asked me what I needed to grow, not what I could give without being asked. It didn't pay as much, but it felt honest, and that meant everything. Sometimes, late at night, I still think about that moment, standing outside the window of that lodge room, heart cracking open like ice under weight. I think about the look on Eric's face when I walked into his office, about Lila's silence, about the fire I lit with nothing but words, and a button that said, "Send." Was it revenge? Yes, but it was also a boundary. A scream I turned into a sentence. A betrayal I folded into a broadcast. People say revenge is hollow, but sometimes it's the only thing that keeps you from disappearing completely. And now? I wake up every morning without wondering who she's texting. I look in the mirror without flinching. I walk into a new office, in a new part of town, and when someone says, "How are you?" I tell them the truth. I'm better, I'm still healing, but I'm free, and I'll never be quiet again.